Welcome, Realtors, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Phillips, and I am a Realtor in Anderson, South Carolina, and I serve as the NAR Federal Political Coordinator for Congressman Jeff Duncan.
Thank you, David. And for those of you that are watching and you can't see David, David is dialing in today with us. My name is Owen Tyler, and I'm from Charleston. I'm the president of the South Carolina Realtors for 2020. We're honored here to have with us Congressman Duncan. Before we start, thank you for your leadership in Washington, D.C. You have always been a supporter of the real estate industry and homeownership, and we greatly appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, Owen, and thanks to Nick for all that the Realtors do. Thanks to David for always being in contact with us, me and my office, and I look forward to the questions and a conversation today.
All right.
Thank you, Owen. May is the time of the year we all look forward to attending the NAR Legislative Meetings in our nation's capital, but due to the coronavirus, we're conducting these meetings virtually for the first time. And it's one of my favorite Realtor meetings, and I hate that we can't do it together, but we have the opportunity to discuss this in front of all our 24,000 Realtors in our states for the first time, so that's a good thing. For our members who are watching, I hope our conversation today inspires you to attend next year's meeting when hopefully we can be back in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, David. Representative Duncan, you may not know this. We normally only have 125 members from South Carolina attend our annual meetings in D.C. And today to be able to broadcast to all 24,000 members is really an exciting thing for us. It's sad that we can't be there, but we're really excited to kind of get your message out and hear what you have to say about the current state and real estate industry in the United States as a whole. So without any kind of waiting, I'm just going to kind of jump right in, if that's good with everybody, and we'll get started. Realtors are monitoring, as you can imagine, like the rest of the country is, all of the issues from COVID-19 crisis that are affecting the nation's homeowners, our real estate industry, the mortgage industry, and just the American consumer as a whole. The real estate industry makes up about 9.5 million jobs, and that includes leasing managers, rental industry, and as I'm sure you're very much aware, every 2 home sales generate 1 job in the United States. As you continue to look at legislation and vote, we just ask that you please continue to think about real estate and think about the difficult time that homeowners and commercial property owners are facing, not only in South Carolina and in your district, but all across the country. And a special thank you to the sacrifices that you're making, traveling back, having been in DC, back. Now I believe you're going back again tomorrow. And we appreciate that, all you do.
Well, thank you so much. It's hard for me not to think about the real estate business because I was a realtor and involved in the real estate business for over 16 years, a banker before that. I still own commercial property and residential rental property and some investment properties. My wife and I are building a home right now in another state, a retirement home, and we're dealing with a mortgage company right now. So we're understanding a lot of the issues that folks are dealing with. As a landlord, with the forbearance issues with the non-eviction part, which I never have to worry about. But, if you have rental property, you think about that. I think about, do my commercial tenants, are they going to be able to pay me? Am I going to be able to make my mortgage payment without dipping the other funds? So a lot of the issues that realtors and investors and people involved in the real estate industry as a whole are facing, I'm experiencing a little bit of that as well. And so it gives me, I think, a unique perspective on all these things as we address them in Washington.
Really does.
Thank you, Congressman. The CARES Act has provided coronavirus relief to taxpayers and small businesses across South Carolina, but it's been a bumpy ride, to say the least. As we approach the end of the second round of funding, what's next, and what else can Congress do or should do in the next coming weeks or months?
Well, the biggest thing that needs to happen is we need to get the economy back open. We need to open Main Street. I've been an advocate really early in South Carolina for getting back to some common sense approach to reopening the economy. I remember I was at the GSV airport for the Boeing event when a lot of masks came in, and saw Milton Shockley there, who was on the Prisma board. And Milton and I talked about some of the challenges that he was having just showing real estate, just the concerns that the homeowner may have, and the concerns that those that want to look at homes are having. You know, real estate is different than a lot of other commodities. If you're going to invest that kind of money, you want to touch and feel. You want to go see it. You want to walk it. You want to, you know, really experience it. I always experience that with my buyers, and so I understand some of the challenges, but you know, I don't think that this next Pelosi written huge, almost $3 trillion spending bill is the way to go next. I do think Congress will probably take another bite of the apple, whether that's another PPP program, whether that's more funding for PPP. I do know that the states, municipalities, counties need some money, need some help. Government caused this problem. They shut the economy down. I think government has some culpability there and should provide some pain relief for Main Street, but I don't think it ought to come in another $3 trillion tranche. And so we're going to be very cognizant about future taxpayers and about the size and growth of government, the regulatory environment that we may or may not create, and try to shore up small businesses on Main Street America.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. The Realtors support Bill HR 6463, which is essentially a remote online notary system. It has a like all bills out of DC. It has a long name for those of you that are tuning in. Securing and Enabling Commerce Using Remote and Electronic Notarization Act of 2020. It's a mouthful, but essentially what it does is it provides that remote notary access to keep transactions, real estate transactions, from being interrupted, keeps business going. It doesn't cancel anything out. We're urging all of our state delegation to support this bill. Is there anything in this legislation that you see as an issue, and could we call on you to support HR 6463?
Yeah, so this particular bill wasn't immediately on my radar screen, but we're going to take a look at it. I think about the purpose of the notary laws in general. Why do we even have notaries? And that is to ensure that that signature is genuine, especially in documents that are crossing state lines. As I mentioned earlier, we have property in Montana, and we have had to do some things, sign some deeds and whatever, over the years, and those documents have had to be notarized because they were going over state lines, and that the person on the receiving end needed to make sure that that signature was valid. And so if you look at the concept behind notary laws and how this may affect the validity of future notarizations and how they're accepted, we're allowing fax signatures to be an accepted median. But although we do that, we also many times require the original signature to also be sent along. It may be a few days behind the electronic version. And so we're going to look at this bill. I don't know of anything that jumps out other than my concerns about why the notary laws are in existence in the first place and how this may weaken or water down that. That would be the only concern. And I want to talk with some attorneys about that and see what they think.
Well, we certainly appreciate your open-mindedness and willing to look at the bill. That's all we can ask for.
Yeah.
Yeah, Congressman, NAR has joined a broad coalition of organizations representing the financial industry and affordable housing advocates, calling on government regulators to provide a liquidity facility for single-family, multifamily services, ensuring that they can manage this period in unprecedented forbearance, such as a facility which assists of mortgage services that may need additional capacity to support homeowners and renters impacted by the COVID-19.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we've already pumped about $3 trillion into government activity and loans that they're going to be grants. And, as a fiscal conservative, I am worried about how we as a nation are going to pay that money back, and what that might mean to the fiscal health of this nation. But it may mean that we need to do more, and we certainly will look at that provision. Again, that's not something that's just jumped up on my radar screen, but I also need that understand that it's a necessity. And so let's look at that, but let's also consider that we don't want to put our fiscal situation into further dire straits as a nation. I think the best thing to do is open the economy, get people back to work, and let them have the ability to pay their bills, and then the forbearance issue and the other things you mentioned will go by the wayside. I think the most important thing is open the economy back up.
Representative, you touched earlier on when we started about talking about forbearance, and we talk about it now. While we certainly support tenants and renters who have experienced economic distress, we're also very cognizant of property owners, whether they be commercial property owners who have buildings being rented by businesses that are shut down and can't generate any income, or whether it be the person who buys a single family residence or a condo as part of their retirement plan, and that's the only thing they own, and in 20 years they're going to sell that and contribute that to the retirement. Currently, there's some prohibitions of eviction in the state of South Carolina, as well as across the nation. Currently, renters in federally assisted properties are provided with 120-day protection from eviction, but a landlord only can get a 90-day forbearance. In addition to that, many localities have made other prohibitions to evictions and housing providers, and what we're seeing is a large number of property owners, be it commercial or residential, that are not having the income in, and frankly don't have the money to pay that mortgage or that taxes or those insurance. Is there anything that Congress can do to help with that without creating a problem in mortgage liquidity, or without creating some type of legislation that would harm us in the future?
So first off, I think if you've got a 90-day forbearance and 120-day eviction, those are out of whack. They need to get leveled 120 and 120, or 90 and 90, whatever. The landlord shouldn't be at an undue disadvantage over the tenants. As a landlord myself, I fully understand that, and I've got other means, other access to income that I can use to pay, but a lot of folks don't. They're relying on that rental income to pay their mortgage on their investment in that property in the first place. And so if you're talking about eviction and forbearance, those numbers should be equal. And if it takes a congressional action to do that, we'll be glad to support that and look at that, encourage the administration if they can do something executively that HUD can do it. We're definitely on board with that. So I'm concerned that the municipalities are involved with evictions. So you got the federal, the state, and now the municipalities involved in it. And there's not one set standard which landlords should have to abide by, versus trying to figure out how to navigate all this. So as we continue to debate these issues, I'm gonna keep you guys in mind, keep those investors in mind, because if we lose those investors, then we lose future growth in retail shopping centers or in rental type property for residential. And if we lose those investors, then that availability goes away for a period of time in the foreseeable future. And we don't need that availability to go away. We need to keep the juice flowing for those investors to invest in those type properties.
Thank you.
Congressman, while homeowners have been provided forbearance, they will still be responsible for making these mortgage payments in the future. With COVID-19 impacting the finances and countless of Americans and families, the services of housing counselors will be more valuable than ever. We encourage Congress to increase funding for these vital resources and providers. What are your thoughts on that?
So certainly willing to look at that. That legislation may come up. It may be a part of something that's broader, which is usually because of that specific issue, it'll probably be part of something much broader. And if not, if there's a segue to include it, if it's germane, we'll definitely work with the powers that be to put that into legislation. I agree with those counselors needing to be out there.
Thank you.
Representative, realtors support HR 5377 and its companion bill 3178, which is in the Senate, and that's a change to SALT. When SALT passed, it created essentially a marriage penalty, where married people filing jointly are limited to a $10,000 deduction in state and local taxes, regardless of whether there's an single individual or taxpayers filing jointly. NAR believes that by increasing that limit to $20,000 for joint returns, that we can bridge the gap for the middle class who have been so dramatically affected by that. Is there something that you can speak on that? I know fiscal conservancy is a big thing for you, but increasing that deduction to $20,000 for married filing jointly as opposed to 10.
So I can see where that's a problem for NAR nationally, but if you think about it, this is a tricky one because before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you had really about 5 or 6 states that were getting the main advantage of SALT deductions, and if you really drill down, there's a handful of counties in some northern states that were getting the majority of the benefit of that. And what that means is South Carolinians are having to subsidize the federal government for those northern states like New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Texas even as a southern state. But because these states have really high state and local taxes, property taxes, and when we had 100% deduction of that, South Carolinians who have kept our tax rates low weren't deducting as much off of their personal taxes, and so thus they were paying more in taxes, thus subsidizing the federal government. So it's a little tricky. I'll take a look at the $20,000 number. I think there will be some sort of reform with regard to permanence for the middle class tax cut rates, and maybe some SALT issues in there, because a lot of the Democrats from the states I mentioned, which are very large states, so they have large delegations and they've got a lot of strength and power in Washington, they will probably try to do something with state and local income tax legislation. Whether it's going to be the $20,000 issue or whether it's going to be a return to total deductibility. I know what Nancy Pelosi wants. I know that we'll fight some of that she wants, but if it's common sense, it's something that I would support. But I don't want to see a return to where we had it before, because I don't think that's fair for states like South Carolina that is fiscally responsible, has a balanced budget amendment, keeps their taxes low. Yes, that attracts a lot of folks to buy homes in South Carolina. That's one thing that realtors need to realize, is that our low tax rates are very, very attractive for folks to buy homes. But we don't need to be subsidizing those larger states who oftentimes are very fiscally irresponsible in their spending.
Thank you. In the Congressman, in the aftermath of the Great Recession, there was a dramatic increase in single-family homes offered for rental, as opposed to purchase. This has limited existing inventory, especially for the first-time home buyer. We supported provision to provide non-corporate owners a single-family rental house and condo, 1/2 reduction in the current capital gains rate of 15 to 20% in case where the buyer would be an owner occupant of a house. We encourage Congress to offer additional tax incentives to home buyers who plan to live in the houses they purchase. Will tax reform be back on the table anytime soon?
Yeah, so I wish we were talking about a permanent reduction of capital gains taxes, something I supported, something I tried to push in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I really believe that when you see capital gains taxes go down, it spurs economic activity. And I can point to every time the capital gains tax has been reduced, what that means to federal revenues, because revenues go up. People start selling things and reinvesting. So you're absolutely right. If there's an incentive for a conversion of some of these investment properties to first-time home buyer properties, and get a better capital gains tax rate for that investor, I'm all in. So if you hear of a piece of legislation or anything we can do to include that, that's something I would agree with and something I would fully support.
Great, thank you.
I want to switch courses here and talk about what I think is probably a rather timely issue, and that's association health plans. You're no stranger to being self-employed. And self-employed individuals make up the majority of our membership, realtors. Some statistical stuff, nearly 2/3 of our members get their healthcare coverage from their spouse, who's not an independent contractor, Medicare, or the Affordable Care Act. And of that membership, there still remains 10 to 15% are completely uninsured. For years now, NAR has monitored legislation as well as regulatory reforms and really pushed for association health plans with the idea that an association health plan would provide a better, higher quality and more affordable health insurance for people who are members of associations, which are realtors. Is there any way you can help us with that? I feel like it really kind of comes to light now when we're looking at COVID-19, I mean, everyone's thinking about their health today.
Yeah, those that are watching see me laughing and smiling about it. I've been supporting associational healthcare plans since before I ran for Congress. In fact, my wife and I took advantage of that when I first got in the auction business, and she worked for a dentist, and they didn't have benefits, still don't have those type benefits. And we took advantage of the Dental Association healthcare plan to provide insurance for us way back when, and we had a small child at home. So I've been the beneficiary. It's something that I felt like we should have done a long time ago before the ACA to provide more choices. I've used the Realtors Association as a prime example many times. Back in 2010, I talked about, you know, 18,000 state employees had a great Blue Cross Blue Shield state employee plan, but there were at that time 18,000 realtors in the state. And if those 18,000 had access to an associational healthcare plan, then boom, we would have something that might be comparable to that Blue Cross Blue Shield plan because the size of the group that was involved. And so absolutely, any way we can get these type plans involved in any kind of healthcare reform, I'm all on board. In fact, the administration is with us on that. The president has talked about it. There's an injunction from a judge for what he was trying to do. Hopefully that'll come back around. But you guys can always count on me for being a supporter of those type healthcare plans, because I think it creates a group and it provides lower costs for those individuals. It spreads that risk over a larger group. It actually is market principles, and it works. And I would love to see that back on the table as options, more options for groups like the Realtors Association or the Auctioneers Association or, hey, the Dental Association, any of those. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Congressman, there has been some talk about infrastructure being included in the relief package to stimulate the economic development. Funding for fixing the America Surface Transportation FAST Act expires September 30th, 2020. The bill governs our nation's federal service transportation spending, and reauthorizations will provide certainty of ongoing construction work, much of which has been deemed essential, and to make much needed improvements to our nation's infrastructure. What's next for the FAST Act, and will it include necessary broadband investments for South Carolina's rural communities?
Yeah, so I was on a call. I'm part of the WHIP team. We were on a call today, and we had ranking member Sam Graves from Missouri on the call. He talked about infrastructure bill, talked about FAST Act. Not sure. I mean, that's a tough one. It seems like the spirit of bipartisanship is going away in Washington, at least as we lead up toward a November election. And so to answer your question definitively is very difficult. I do know that that Ranking Member Graves is very acutely aware of the expiration. I think we'll probably see, and this is just Jeff Duncan's guess because he didn't say anything about this on the call, but we'll probably see some sort of extension in September or by the expiration of the FAST Act. Just because it's an election year and nobody wants to make dramatic changes, but also nobody wants to see a big amount of money put in an infrastructure bill right now, especially after we put $3 trillion in the economy, to come right back on the back end of that with a huge spending bill might be a little bit difficult. The progressive left wants to get a lot of the Green New Deal items in some sort of an infrastructure bill. Let me tell you what I'm focused on, and I'll give it's kind of a shout out. I talked with Jim Clyburn about this back in a meeting in his office. Lord, that had to be back in early fall of last year. We got together as a delegation, and I brought broadband up to him. I think rural broadband is an important issue. We're finding now with this pandemic where people are doing exactly what we're doing from home. They're doing more Zoom conferences. They're doing more work on their computers. They're needing access to the internet. We're seeing more and more the need for better internet service, better broadband. We're seeing school buses going into communities where there's not good internet access, just so those school children can continue their lessons while they're at home. And that's K through 12. That's not counting all the higher ed issues with students like my son who finished his final chemistry exam today from Wofford online in his room. So putting more fiber optic in the ground and having a federal investment, I think is important. I look at fiber optics sort of like we looked at electricity back in the 1940s and 50s when Lyndon B. Johnson was in Texas trying to get electrification of the rural areas, and out of that we had the creation of the electric cooperatives. That sort of effort of both public and private partnerships, creating entities or helping entities invest in rural broadband, is going to be very, very important. And it's very it's exacerbated. It's very clear during this pandemic how much that particular infrastructure is needed in this nation.
Right. Thank you.
I can't agree with you more. No longer is internet access a luxury. I think many of us are lucky to live in areas where it's there, but there are neighborhoods right around the corner from me in Charleston, South Carolina, where literally children cannot finish their schoolwork until that school bus comes in for that couple hours a day to sit in that neighborhood. And I think it's so important. So thank you for your report on that. It really is so important to the future of I think, our state, to ensure that we can educate and communicate with everyone, regardless of where they are in the state. We are running out of time, and we want to be respectful of your time. I have one last question, kind of like a what do you think question. I think we all kind of agree that most Americans today are living in fear. And people are scared, they're worried, they're nervous, regardless of whether it's their health or their financial well-being. People are uneasy. What do you think it will take to ease the fears of Americans and restore confidence? And how long do you think this is going to last, this pandemic, this global crisis that we're having?
Yeah, I think we're starting to flatten the curve and see the curve reduce. I think that was one of the dynamics that government wanted to reopen. I think sort of like the Groundhog Day. You come out of your hole, you look around, you either see your shadow or you don't. I'm not one that lives in fear, and I would think, America's a Christian nation. Folks that shouldn't live in fear will get out. Once a little bit of the stay is lifted, and they get out and they start going to restaurants, and they're already going to the grocery store and they're going to Home Depot and Lowe's. My gosh, but they can't go to the local hardware store or the local retailer. So there's a huge dichotomy between the big box stores and the little guy, and the little guy's the one that's suffering. So I think reopening the economy, getting more people out, get past that fear factor, maybe build some herd immunity, if you like that term. I believe we'll all be exposed to this virus, just like we're exposed to flu virus and cold virus, and our bodies fight it off in different ways. It will be fatal to a segment of the population, and I think we have learned a lot. We can be very, very careful, especially for those demographics that are susceptible more than others. But look, we have got to get folks out and get them back to work and back to shopping, and hopefully in the fall back to ball games, whether that's Death Valley or Williams-Brice or Sanford Stadium. I don't care, but I want to get back to some sort of semblance of normalcy here, and I think getting our economy back open is the most important thing. You know, thinking and going back to my conversation with Milton Shockley earlier this month. You know, if I was a realtor or if I was someone that had a house for sale, you know, COVID-19 is something that's going to be on my mind. I have strange people coming into my house. They're touching my stuff because they're going to look in the refrigerator if that's part of the deal. They're going to open the cabinets. I'm going to come home from work at night. I'm going to know someone's showing my house because the realtor is professional, and he's going to let me know. Do I go down and wipe every cabinet knob, every refrigerator handle, everything? Did they use my toilet? Did they wash their hands on my? So all these things are on the seller side, but you also have those buyers that are going in and they're not wanting to touch anything, and they're not getting that full experience of the piece of property they're wanting to buy. So there are a lot of issues that you guys are dealing with that I did not think about until I had that conversation with Milton, but I thought long and hard about it. And these are things we're going to have to overcome. And a lot of that comes back to what you said earlier. There's a fear factor out there. And until we as a society get over that fear factor and get back to normalcy, I don't know. So I don't have a prediction. I do know it's time, though. And from what I hear from my constituents, they're ready to get out. They're ready to get back to work.
Thank you. Any final remarks for our realtor members out there?
Well, I just look forward to seeing y'all in Washington, D.C. The next time you come up for an in-the-face, person-to-person meeting. We may just elbow bump and not shake hands, but I want to see you. I want to talk to you in person, and I want y'all to know you got a friend in me on Washington and on Capitol Hill, and any way I can help, please let us know. Some issues are a little trickier than others, but we always try to help the realtors out where we can. So thanks so much, and God bless.
Thank you, Congressman. This has been a great 30 minutes. On behalf of David and myself and our 24,000 commercial and residential members, can you believe we have 24,000 members now? It's crazy.
Wow, that's great.
The South Carolina Realtors would like to thank you again for your diligence and determination during this difficult time. We always look forward to working with you. We always know that you're there to listen and that you will do your best for us and for your constituents in South Carolina. A special thank you to your staff, both locally and in DC. They are so great about keeping us informed and ensuring that we're a part of the conversation in Washington, which literally is half the battle, just being there and knowing that we have someone to go to. So again, thank you very much. Wishing you and your family safety and health. And thank you for everyone for tuning in today.
All right. Thanks, guys. God bless.